Good evening. The opinions and statements voiced by our guests do not necessarily reflect the opinions of this network. Enjoy the shows.
You are listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting, Birmingham, Alabama.
Headline edition, July 8, 1947. The Army Air Forces has announced that a flying disc has been found and is now in the possession of the Army. Army officers say the missile, found sometime last week, has been inspected at Roswell, New Mexico, and sent to Wright Field, Ohio, for further inspection.
Now, historic films made in the spring of 1948 and just released show Eniwetok preparing for heavily guarded and still largely secret tests of new atomic weapons. The test's purpose is to measure atomic effects on thousands of different materials, 30,000 tons of them, not, as at Bikini, to prove military effectiveness.
San Francisco police say that 9 persons have been arrested in a narcotics raid on the headquarters of the Grateful Dead, a widely popular singing group. 2 members of the group, Rod McKernan and Robert Weir, and their business manager, Danny Rifkin, have been booked on suspicion of possessing narcotics.
3, 2, 1, 0. All engine running. Liftoff. We have a liftoff. 32 minutes past the hour. Liftoff on Apollo 11. Tower cleared.
Hey, we got a roll program. Neil Armstrong reporting their roll and pitch program, which puts Apollo 11 on a proper heading.
I'm going to step off the limb now. That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
Well, strange lights are causing a viral buzz on YouTube. Could we have caught extraterrestrial activity on a recent newscast? Brandon Arroyo investigates.
As the newscast ended, the controversy began back on September 26th. What is that light shining in the back of the dark night sky?
With coverage reaching all the way back to 1948, for over 70 years, Fate magazine has brought you reports of the strange and unknown, all of them true. Now, Fate Magazine Radio is carrying on that tradition of setting the standard in paranormal talk radio as we report and discuss some of the most mysterious and perplexing phenomena imaginable in this strange world of ours. Now, here is your host of Fate Magazine Radio, Kat Hobson.
Welcome to Fate Mag Radio, the online voice of Fate Magazine. I am Kat Hobson, your host, and I am so very pleased to be able to welcome Dr. Jacques Vallée to Fate. This is a fantastic interview. It's pre-recorded, but this is great information, and I know you're going to enjoy it. Dr. Vallée, I welcome you to Fate. I'm glad you're here. I've been looking forward to this interview. Out of curiosity, while we're discussing your new book with Paolo, we are discussing the Trinity crash site. What caused these craft to appear?
Many people don't understand what happened after the death of Hitler in Europe. You know, the war could have gone on for another 2 years. And the decision to use the bomb was a very difficult decision on the part of President Truman, and a lot of discussions with the army about whether or not we should even use the bomb, and because of it would change history. So it changes history, and here is this object that appears out of nowhere, 20 miles from the test site. Nobody has been warned, about the bomb. People are still wondering what's going to happen. Japan capitulates, and 2 days later, this object appears out of nowhere. And many people have ignored it, including, researchers who went to the site with Paola, spoke to the witnesses, both Mr. Padilla and Remy Baca, and could hear the testimony, but they didn't see the connection somehow. Paola saw the connection very, very clearly. Well, because she is, attuned to history. She has taught the history of the 20th century, both in Rome and in the U.S. And she was obviously eager to get more data. Now, I should say I'm very grateful to be alive now when the stigma has been removed from the UFO, UAP subject.
Don't you think you had a lot to do with that?
I had a little bit to do with that, but
I would say.
So did other people who are no longer here, like
yes.
Dr. Heineck and many others, and many witnesses who were courageous enough to bring out their observations and tell us about it. So it's great to have seen that reversal, the fact that now the government and the intelligence community, are saying openly that this is a real phenomenon. It's not a bunch of hoaxes. It's not a bunch of errors on the part of people. Reliable people have been reporting something that's real, okay, and that we have to pay attention to, and we don't have the explanation. Now, where we go from here is open. It's a matter for, political wisdom, if there is such.
Do those go together? I'm a political science major. They don't always mesh, the wisdom and the politics.
They don't. If you look at the history of NASA, or how decisions were made, that were very often against the best interest of science, and that's the way the system has to work, and but now we are in a much more open area, and I think that my role now is more to help other people fill in the gap of the history of all this, because one thing I'm afraid of is that new people are going to come in who are very competent in their own fields, but they will quickly jump to premature hypotheses and maybe premature conclusions without looking at the whole history. For example, right now, all you see on TV is an image. Okay, well, and the the recordings from the aircraft of things in flight or over the fleet. Well, that's obviously very important, but this is all the last 10 or 15 years. What about the last 50 years? What about the last 70 years? And here with Trinity, we're going back to 1945, where everything changed. And so it's important to be able to document it and to teach it to some extent.
That's one of the things that I really liked about the book. The interaction with the boys into their manhood and their late adulthood. I thought that it was so imperative that you included some of the researchers who were there with the bomb, who were developing and testing the weaponry. I've been to the Atomic Museum. The subject fascinates me. Stanton Friedman was somebody that I interviewed several times, and he explained a lot of what was going on in the time period as we got to know each other better. I found it really interesting that when you approached him about this, about the boys' experience there, that he didn't correlate the imperatives with Roswell, because this was at the testing. Roswell was at the aftermath of the actual dropping of the weapons.
In 1945, the word flying saucer doesn't exist.
Mm-hmm.
So it's going to be invented by Kenneth Arnold,
right.
2 years later. The CIA does not exist. The Air Force does not exist.
Yeah.
There is no Air Force. And the object that we're dealing with is not a saucer. It's an egg-shaped craft that obviously is not the product of a hoax of any kind, because remember, the first witness is not the boys. The first witness is a pilot, a very highly competent pilot of a bomber, B-25, that's coming in for landing at Alamogordo, which is the airfield in the middle of White Sands, where the bomb has been tested. And this is 1 month to the day after the test of the bomb. He is coming in for a landing. The tower, Alamogordo Tower, asked him to look at a communication tower, which is in the north side of the range, that has lost all power. And he circles that tower. They call it a Marconi tower,
right.
And it was used to direct civilian and military aircraft around the military zone. He sees that the tower has been bent, that it's obviously out of commission. Something has hit the tower. And then he sees and reports 2 little kids with their horses in the, some distance away, where there is a fire, and apparently some egg-shaped thing is on fire. Yes. Well, the egg-shaped thing is, the kids call it an avocado. Yes. Of course, they won't speak Spanish. And it's not burning. The brush is burning. But the object itself is the size of 2 trucks. It's very hard. It's very solid. It survived the crash against the tower. Yes. That a normal airplane would have blown into pieces. It survived the crash, and then he made sort of a controlled crash landing in the brush, made a turn under power, but there is no visible form of power. There are no propellers, no reactors, nothing else. So where is the power? And that's where science should become interested, because, we don't have anything that does that. We don't have anything that flies that way. The kids will describe 3 beings, and we will be able to, in this book, I've reconstructed day by day by day what the kids were doing.
I loved the chart in the back that you created with the daily activity for that time period. Yes, that was so helpful to me as I was going back with my review.
Yes, and that's where I could contribute something in researching the background and the technical stuff. We found the temperatures every day. The temperature range, whether it was raining or not, from the local archives and so on. So we reconstructed all of that, reconstructed all the dates. The kids were there for 10 days. So the difference with Roswell, in my view, it supports Roswell. It makes Roswell much more credible.
It does, because
now we know those things exist and those things happen.
But I was interested because there's so many. May I interrupt you? I'm so sorry. I have a question.
No, please.
Okay. I usually do these just as conversation. And I've never had the opportunity to ask you things. So thank you for your patience. There were several crashes besides these 2. And we never hear of those. I do, because I work with people that research this and who are doing the math to try to get the capability of that flight method. But there were crashes fairly regularly for a period, and they were all over the globe.
There were, and I came into this, and this was not the first crash case that I investigated in New Mexico. I had looked at actually two others, and one I had started to do work at the site with a friend who lived in New Mexico and was very familiar with the territory there. He comes from a long family of New Mexico ranchers. And so I had some acquaintance already, but I did not realize what had happened. There were stories and so on. Brief. You mentioned Stanton Friedman. He was aware of that case, but he said he didn't. He told Paola he did not have time to work on it because he was working, constantly on Roswell, working on one of his books about Roswell. So,
well, knowing Stanton, I found that very not Stanton-ish, because there was a correlation. And I do know that he was single-focused a lot, but that just seemed like he missed a great opportunity to combine knowledge from two sites that were relevant.
You have to forgive him because we all do that. Scientists do that. They miss experiments, they miss opportunities. You're working intently on something that you have a deadline, you have to finish it. It's difficult. Somebody brings up something else. Mm-hmm. 2 days ago, I got an email from someone in Latin America who thinks that he knows where he can get alien blood from a case where, blood has been preserved. Well, I can't drop everything and, fly to South America and start doing the basic research, which would take weeks or months before I could even locate the person, let alone the blood. And so if there is blood. So you have to make those choices as to what is the most important right now. Now, I'm not neglecting that thing. We filed it away. No. There are other people who are going to look at it, but I just can't do that. So I would forgive our friend Stanton, from not having immediately jumped on 1945.
Just so you know, I would never second guess Stanton, but he is a person who had a lot of patience with me and educated me and got me to the point that I could understand some of the work that was being done. So I'm really not second guessing him. I'm just surprised that he was able to not do it, because I would have thought that would have been almost a compulsion for him.
Well, it probably something that he filed away for later, and he was, Roswell has been such a busy subject for everybody that he probably never had the time to get back to Trinity. Yes. But again, in science, you have to choose your subject. Look at the demands on the big observatories. I read recently, a piece from Dr. Avi Loeb at Harvard, describing the details about how Oumuamua was detected as it rushed through the solar system. Well, something like that happens, and it's going to be gone in 4 days. You have to pick it at the right time if you want to get good data. But all the big observatories are committed for 3 months, 6 months, a year, on long-term studies. And those are expensive, and those involve teams of people and so on. So they had to obtain permission to get half an hour here, an hour there on different telescopes around the world. It's not that you can just drop what you're doing and all of a sudden jump on another subject. So I can understand Stanton was an extraordinary researcher, was very patient, and he had the unusual ability to work both in the field, steadily and so on, and also in the libraries, in the records, in the depositories of government material and so on. So, I wish he were still with us now.
I do too. On that note, I believe we're going to take a break, and we will be back right after this. Thanks for being here.
You are listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting, Birmingham, Alabama.
Paratalk Radio is your one-stop for all things paranormal, the unknown, and the supernatural. Join us every Monday night at 8 p.m. Eastern, 7 p.m. Central for discussions and guests on topics such as ghosts, hauntings, Bigfoot, UFOs, and more. This broadcast is rated M for mature and intended for listeners over 16 on paratalkradio.com.
Oh, come on. I'm Southern, but... Nope. That'll do. Hello. I am Kat Hobson, host of Paranormal Experience here on WBHM Digital Broadcasting out of Birmingham, Alabama. I enjoy having guests from all areas of the paranormal, from ghosts to ufology to cryptids and beyond. You'll find some of the best researchers in their fields bringing you some great information. Join me on Wednesday nights from 8 to 10 p. Eastern here on WBHM Digital Broadcasting.
Since 1948, Fate magazine has brought you reports of the strange and unknown, all of them true. Fate Radio is carrying on that tradition, bringing you the unusual, macabre, strange, and bizarre. Join host Kat Hobson Sunday nights from 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern on WBHM Digital Broadcasting.
Thank you for listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting out of Birmingham, Alabama. The time is 23 minutes after the hour, and we're back. Please continue your thoughts, Dr. Vallée.
There are two parts in the book. One part is, our investigation at Trinity, which continues. And as you know, we found Paola found a new witness, Sabrina, who came in a little bit later, but could describe what happened at the site, as time went on, and what materials had been found at the site. And those are, there are 4 different types of materials that we don't quite understand. Okay? Some of them could have been early laboratory tests from some advanced metallurgical companies like Battelle, others, but others we just don't have the explanation.
Well, the metallurgical side is fascinating.
Yes.
My husband is a machinist and works with metals. So to me, that topic is fascinating. And especially when it's something that is not commonly put together here. Please, will you explain some more about that?
About the site itself and the materials?
Please.
Sure. Of course, that was one of my primary interests. The witnesses over the years had recovered things that the soldiers hadn't had time to pick up.
Right.
So, after all, it was their ranch. So they had the right to pick up whatever was there. The soldiers were gone. They had taken the avocado, put it on the truck and they taken it out. We don't know where it went. It's a good guess that it went to Los Alamos, and from there, different parts may have gone to different places. But this would be covered by a type of secret that's not the normal, defense secret. So it explains why, certainly in all my years working with people who were doing research on the subject, I never heard of this, and they had never heard of it, even though they had clearances, some of them very high clearances.
Right.
But unless you were cleared both for the defense, topics and for the atomic secrets,
yes,
which were in a completely different system, you would not know about it. You would not be read in into the secrets. So that is, completely explained now. The important thing is that, my background is in information science,
yes,
and computer science, but going into AI applied to large databases. That's what I've done. That's what I did at Northwestern. That's what I did at Stanford. And that's what I did in the classified project that is now called ASWAP or ATIP or who knows.
Whatever it is this week, yes.
It keeps morphing into new acronyms, which is, a major form of entertainment in Washington is to change the acronyms of everything from time to time. So, but I know what we did. And what we did was, a massive database of cases from all over the world, where I contributed a few of the databases that went into the data warehouse, and then we kept expanding it and so on. So some of it is essentially that part of the project is still classified, and it's classified for good reasons. I have no problem about that. I just hope that as time goes on, those reasons will be less and less important, and then the database can be used, by everybody. But
that would be the best of everything.
Yes, and it's the only tool that enables us to look at big patterns, at major patterns around the phenomenon around the world. My fear is that Congress may decide to fund a study of, what the military has seen in the last 5 years. In their hearings, we saw there were 200 cases. Well, I'm sorry, but in the data warehouse we built, there's 260,000 cases.
Yes.
Okay? And those are many of them are well observed, by not only the US, but other countries. And that has been ignored. And I'm afraid that if we ignore that, we're just picking up a little crumb, that's not representative of everything else. It's very tempting to start with the military, because certainly, especially since the last 5 years, the military has had extraordinary devices, including the infrared the targeting cameras and the new radars that give us an abundance of good scientific data. But, a farmer in his field isn't a bad witness either, because he knows the environment, he knows the weather, he knows the reactions of the animals, he knows what he has seen in his own. So what I want to continue to do, and about half of the study in the book, is not about Trinity. It's about two other cases that have the same characteristics. And here, it's my bias as an information nerd, if you will, from Silicon Valley, to look for patterns among other cases. If Trinity is real, there must be other cases like it. Okay, that's the premise that I took. You cannot do science with one thing. Okay. There
Not
are
good
cases.
Science.
where you have to start with one thing like the universe. So far, we only know one of them, but even that is a bias, is a problem. We wish we had another to compare. Well, here we have lots of data to compare it to, but two are coming to mind right away. Socorro, which is 8 miles straight north of Trinity.
Yes.
Where we have a good witness, we have traces, we have, again, an egg-shaped object, not a disk, and we have diminutive pilots, that were about the size of a 10-year-old kid, could breathe our air, had 2 eyes and a nose and a mouth, were not quite human. The kids compare them to insects, they are not quite sure. They are afraid of them. At the same time, they have pity on them at Trinity. In Socorro, the witness was a policeman. He was afraid of what he saw, and for good reason, because the object, we had never seen anything like it, and these two occupants or creatures, however we want to call them, went back inside the thing, took off. Okay, and so it's not a crash; it's a controlled landing in an area that I've gotten to know very well. I was working with Dr. Hynek at the time at Northwestern, so I remember that case. I remember how we analyzed it together and so on, and how we tried to recover some of the material that was at the site, which we have now recovered, by the way. That we're going to be testing with Dr. Nolan at Stanford and so on. So the third case is a French case that I also know very well, the case in Valençol, which is in the French files. I'm a member of the French committee that's officially looking at UFOs. France is the only country that has had a continuing official study for the last 40 years under the space agency. So it's not military, it's a space agency which is well equipped to look at advanced technology. And there were investigations by 5 different agencies of the French government. So again, in Socorro and in Valençol, we are not dealing with hearsay, we are not dealing with reports from the public, we're dealing with official reports that have been immediately, officially studied, the same day or the next day. So the pattern is obvious. In Valençol, there were again 2 small humanoids, very similar to the ones in Trinity. That's the only case where there was what you could interpret as an offensive reaction to the witness. The witness was walking towards the ship. One of the humanoids took a little gadget and pointed it at the witness, and the witness was paralyzed. And he was not hurt permanently, but he could not move any closer. The witness is a remarkable man. He was a leader in the resistance during the war when he was a young man. So here the situation was reversed with the gendarmes. I mean, the gendarmes treated him as a French military hero, not just as some farmer who thought he had seen something. Yes. They knew him, and he was actually a significant businessman in the area. I got to meet him. I got to go to the site several times with him, and I got to talk to other people in the area who had also seen things. Paola is right now in France, and today she is in Valençol. She wanted to also go, which shows, a good journalist isn't just going to work on hearsay. And she had all my stories about Valençol, but she wanted to go check it, and which is, I
got to check every source.
Yes,
you have to validate.
to see things now. It's been 15 years since I've gone to Valençol, so there are probably new stories that are coming out, and that she's going to pick up. So that's important.
She really is astonishing.
So that's it's not one case. It's not the Trinity case. It's a pattern. And once you have a pattern in science, everything changes, And that's why, I was picked to design the database for the ATIP project. But because I knew where the data was and I knew what we needed to do to prepare the data for in-depth correlation and eventually for AI. So that's where the project went.
When you were doing all of the things, getting prepared for your computer and your AI work, I know that you were an astronomer, studying astronomer in France before you came. Why isn't the correct term? How did you manage to stay the science person where you're actually doing good science? You have your information, you have your documentation, you're doing all the things that are required in order to produce a good scientific theory or history. And did all of the methodologies that you had in place aid you as you came in to be able to do the internet type of work, the AI type of work, all of the data that you were learning to recognize, compile, manipulate to be able to find patterns, that type of thing? It all works. Does it all work in each field that you're participating?
I would not necessarily, but I think that in a topic like this, you can approach it from psychology, you can approach it from sociology, you can approach it from astronomy, like Harvard does with Dr. Avilom. You can approach it from journalistic reporting, and so you need a combination of things. I think that you need a team, and I think in that team you need someone who thinks like an information scientist. Mm-hmm. Now, any physicist with a PhD thinks of himself as an information scientist because he knows how to use a computer. That's not the way it works. Okay, that's not the way it works, and that's the way to make big mistakes. So my role is more. I have two roles. I mean, I like to go into the field. I want to talk to the witness. I want to gain their confidence and be on their side, because they don't really know what they've seen, and very often it has changed their life.
Yes.
And I want to be. I know I have to be part of the healing process, just letting them explain to me what they've done, and I'm not injecting any personal hypothesis. I'm just trying to record that and to do it well. The other part is to try to place what all these witnesses, and by now we have hundreds of thousands, yes, into a matrix where we can extract maybe the next level of science. So nobody's going to do that. No one person or one team is going to do that. I've argued for a long time that if Congress wants to do something, they shouldn't pick one team. They should do it the way the internet was built, yes, by having an open challenge to science, and let different people with different ideas, some of which none of us has thought about yet, to get some of the funding. And then I think the government, whether it's National Science Foundation or DARPA or somebody else, should be just the arbiter, the monitoring force, sort of synchronizing all of that. That's, I lived through the birth of the internet. I mean,
Yes.
when I was at Stanford Research Institute, we had engine number 2 on the internet. So that there is a long tradition there, a real intellectual tradition. And I think we need to build something like that. We need to build a culture of discovery around UFOs and stop laughing at the witnesses.
I agree. Do you think that with the way things are now, that's going to be possible on a governmental level? I attended a conference, and you're probably familiar with the Scientific Coalition for UAP Studies, based out of. I was at their conference this year.
Yes.
And it's from all walks of life. It's from all walks of science. Not.
Yes.
You have people who are working just all over the spectrum, and they all come together with respect. There's a man in Italy who's actually teaching a class on this. There are people from Germany participating, through videos such as this. It was that's what I believe you're discussing. And if we can do it on a level of rocket scientists, then we should be able to have the government come in and say, let's do this.
We are going to have to take a break right quick, and we will be back. Thank you so much for listening. Y'all come back too.
You are listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting, the best in paranormal talk, only on Paranormal Experience Radio, broadcasting live out of Birmingham, Alabama.
Oh, come on. I'm Southern, but... Nope. That'll do. Hello. I am Kat Hobson, host of Paranormal Experience here on WBHM Digital Broadcasting out of Birmingham, Alabama. I enjoy having guests from all areas of the paranormal, from ghosts to ufology to cryptids and beyond. You'll find some of the best researchers in their fields bringing you some great information. Join me on Wednesday nights from 8 to 10 p. Eastern here on WBHM Digital Broadcasting.
Since 1948, Fate magazine has brought you reports of the strange and unknown, all of them true. Fate Radio is carrying on that tradition, bringing you the unusual, macabre, strange, and bizarre. Join host Kat Hobson Sunday nights from 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern on WBHM Digital Broadcasting.
Listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting, the best in paranormal talk, only on Paranormal Experienced Radio, broadcasting live out of Birmingham, Alabama.
And we're back. Dr. Vallée?
No.
I understand what you're saying with that. It's a great plan if they will just do it.
The government, in the case of the internet, which we were using now, played a true role of telling the scientific community, look, there is a national need for a new type of network, and we're going to allocate money to it. But they did not direct how it should be. They only provided a number of basic protocols, and then people could come in with their own ideas, their own contributions. Everybody had to agree to use the same protocol.
Okay.
But the machines were different. The computers were different. The communication systems were different. But there was an underlying, the government only mandated a certain basic structure, which was packet switching. And, I worked in that area under Paul Baran, B-A-R-A-N, who was, the scientist who invented packet switching. It was invented several times by several people, but he's the one who invented it and actually built the demonstration at the RAND Corporation. So I had the privilege of working with extraordinary people who are my mentors. And I try to follow, you're asking why a scientist, I try to follow that discipline. I'm here in France helping prepare a meeting in Toulouse. Toulouse is important because it's the main site for Airbus, among other things, but also for the CNES, which is the French space science organization within the government, which is number 3, most wealthy space organization in the world, after NASA and Roscosmos in Russia. Among other things, they own the Kourou spaceport, in the north of South America, which is on the equator, from which they can launch in any direction. They can launch, Russian spacecraft. Well, not anymore, but they did, as well as Italian rockets and, of course, French rockets. And they put the new telescope, that we hear about. They launched it from Kourou, the French.
I didn't realize that.
So there is a meeting in 3 weeks in Toulouse where 6 countries will be presenting. The US is not there. There will be probably a couple of things from the US. The NASA has agreed that its spokesperson, its PR person, would address the proceedings, which is nice. But I think NASA at this point is not really researching the subject. They're researching the research about the subject, which is maybe a good way for them to familiarize themselves with what has been going on. But they will find that there is a rich pool of data. The other countries are Germany, the UK, Holland, Norway, Sweden, did I say Italy, Spain, and Argentina, and there will be other individuals from other countries. So I'm sure when I go back to San Francisco, where I live, I turn on the TV, it's all going to be again about the Nimitz and, American cases and the military, and is it a threat, are they going to invade us, and so on. What about the other 90% of the world? I mean, why not open this up? I mean, there may be things that need to remain secret. A perfect example, people are saying, why don't you disclose the videos from the F-18s? Well, the videos from the F-18 have a screen with certain things on the screen.
Yes.
Those things have to do with very, very high technology.
Yes.
You can't show that on primetime TV. I mean, no way. Okay, just like the databases that we worked with, during the classified project, have very good reason to remain classified for a while because they involve, injuries to human beings and doctors' reports that should not be, in the tabloids or should not be, in ordinary computers. I mean, that data needs to be scrubbed. It needs to be done in a way that protects the witnesses. And, again, it's not, for the most part, it's not a military concern so much as, protecting the individuals and also allowing the data to evolve to the next levels. And that's, that was a project all along.
Yes.
And by the way, there were over 20 people working on it full time for 2 years. And nobody has really thought about that, because computer science is boring. So people tend to look at the things that are more, that look sexy on TV.
Well, it's all about drawing the public in so that you can get the funding and look like a hero and, present like a fait accompli. Yes. And it just happened.
Ultimately, there have been a couple of books that have been authorized, to talk about this. So to that extent, I can, talk about that data.
It's, I find it so almost disheartening that the United States will not be represented, officially part of this group, because NASA has such a our country overall has such a rich history of being willing to step out and envision how to be part of these things. Yep. And for us to be missing from this table is disheartening.
Well, my hope is that eventually there will be an international, but it's not for me. It's not for me to decide. Well, I hear people, even at the congressional hearings that we saw, on TV a couple of months ago, there was a strong expression that this should not be shared with other countries. I can understand, during that project, I worked with a group that was, working under clearance and so on. And, I understand that process. I have no problem with that process. But at the same time, if we can benefit from, because I know the international files, so having worked on those databases, I know there are cases that the investigators or researchers in the US should know about that would solve problems that they have on their desk, about specific cases. Those other countries are not coming forward with that because they're afraid of being ridiculed by America, which is to them the epitome of great science. And you don't want, we were actually told we're not going to release that because we don't want the Americans to laugh at us.
My word.
Well,
that's horrid. We should be open.
It's been the case for a long time. There are files that remain closed, that are not classified, that could be released, that could be made part of an international dialogue, and that the U.S. doesn't know about.
That does not bode well, because if they're doing it here, where else is that happening?
Well, when I wake up at 2:00 in the morning, as I do, when I've just traveled around the world like this, I try to think about that. And now that the stigma has been removed, everybody is talking about, disclosure.
Yes.
Now we admit officially in the cathedral in Washington, the head of American intelligence has said, this is not a subject we understand, and it's serious, and it's not, something to be brushed up. So you would think that now things would be open, and we would have some form of disclosure. I realize that 10 people define disclosure 10 different ways, but there would be an opening. But if it's not a joke now, and it's not a bunch of crazy cowboys, who have drunk too much or whatever, and farmers who don't recognize a meteor, or a comet, if it's serious, then it could be a threat. And if it's a threat, we have to study it. And the method we have to study it is classified.
Yes.
So we're caught, and I don't think the people who research UFOs, have realized that. They keep demonstrating to have disclosure, but you can only have disclosure if you think it's a serious problem. If you think it's a serious problem, it's potentially a danger. So the last thing you're going to have is disclosure. You'll have some superficial disclosure because now witnesses, I mean, the great thing is telling, giving permission to government employees to come forward and report on what they've seen, okay? Yes. Obviously, this will have to be screened appropriately and so on. We're going to get, a deluge of cases. And by the way, that's one thing that we should anticipate, and build a structure that would deal with that, okay? And we have the techniques to deal with that, but somebody should think through how we're going to do that. Otherwise, it's going to be, you could have, almost overnight, you could have 10,000 cases,
without a lot. Yes.
To study, okay?
Yes.
And we know that's happened in other countries, that when there was the equivalent of disclosure and everything got shut down because there were too many cases coming out.
Can I ask you a question about disclosure? I have always had the opinion, and everyone has opinions, that disclosure actually has already occurred. When Blue Book closed and there were still so many cases left unexplained, that was the government saying, okay, we've got these answers for you. Look at these shiny, pretty answers that we have over here and pay no attention to these that we can't answer. Because obviously UFOs are not really a thing, but we do have answers here. And we have had that happen all the way through from that point to this, where, okay, now we have ATIP, SWAT, whatever. And, you have people like yourself, people like Mr. Bigelow, who is just fascinated by this topic, people like DeLong and all of the people that are working with him. I'm sure you are too. I mean, there is such a group of fantastic individuals who have been working on this, people with impeccable reputations as well as people that have come new to the game. And do you not feel like disclosure has already occurred? Like we already know this is a thing.
Well, the question is, what is it that we're disclosing? If we disclose that there is one more thing in the world that we don't understand, scientists will say, well, what else is new? I mean, we don't even understand when a woman has a baby, we don't understand what triggers the birth of the baby. Mm-hmm. Okay. It's been studied, obviously, by biologists, by doctors, and by geneticists, but the precise determination, and as and I've known people who are working on that as part of computer studies that I knew about. There is it's a little bit like the ARPANET, or the internet. There is an exchange between the baby and the mother. The baby says, I'm ready. The mother says, I'm ready when you're ready. And this is all translated into floods of chemicals and nervous, things and so on, pain, and then, but that can go on for 12 hours. And then all of a sudden, boom, that the process starts, and baby comes out.
Yes.
And there's nothing that can stop it, but it comes out. Okay.
That's true.
So what is that exchange, that hand holding, between two organisms that are ready, but what is the signal that triggers the thing? I mean, there are hypotheses about that and people working on it. Obviously, it's very important. I mean, it's human birth.
Yes.
But, that's a mystery.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Nora Rahm. Ukraine's capital city will experience scheduled blackouts to reduce strain on the country's power grid after Russian attacks on critical energy infrastructure. NPR's Ashley Westerman reports.
Kyiv, a city of some 3 million people, has been divided into 3 groups, and over Sunday, each group will experience a blackout of, quote, no more than 4 hours, but maybe longer. That's according to energy company DTEK. On their website, DTEK says the scheduled blackouts are meant to help avoid accidents with the power grid following Russian strikes on Ukraine's electricity system Saturday. For the last 2 weeks, Russian forces have repeatedly targeted civilian energy and heating infrastructure across Ukraine, just as the cold is really starting to take hold here. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has urged people to conserve electricity and plan their days around scheduled blackouts. Ashley Westerman, NPR News, Kyiv.
A Russian warplane on a test flight crashed into a 2-story house in Siberia today. Officials say 2 pilots were killed. They say no one on the ground was hurt. The midterm elections are now a little more than 2 weeks away. Early voting is already underway in some states, including North Carolina. NPR's Tamara Keith spoke with suburban voters near Raleigh to get a sense of what matters to them. She said those saying they were voting for Democrats had some strong views.
Several mentioned education and the economy. Some talked about the state of democracy, but I think every single one mentioned abortion and reproductive rights. And Democratic candidates all over the country are counting on this being a motivating issue for their voters, because otherwise all of the historical precedent works against them. Here in North Carolina, abortion access is less restrictive than other southern states, and there's a Democratic governor who could veto a ban, but Democrats are extremely motivated to make sure that Republicans don't get a supermajority in the state legislature.
NPR's Tamara Keith reporting. Investors are watching for new information this coming week about inflation and economic growth after a big rally in the stock market last week. NPR's Scott Horsley reports.
The Commerce Department releases new data Thursday about the economy's performance in late summer and early fall. After disappointing economic growth in the first 6 months of the year, forecasters think GDP growth rebounded in July, August, and September. The government will also report this coming week on what employers had to pay for workers during that period, along with personal income and spending for September and the Federal Reserve's preferred measure of price increases during that month. This past week, investors seem to shrug off worries about inflation and rising interest rates. Both the Dow Jones Industrial Average and the S&P 500 index jumped nearly 5%, while the Nasdaq soared more than 5.2%. Scott Horsley, NPR News, Washington.
This is NPR News. In Beijing today, Xi Jinping was officially named to an unprecedented third 5-year term as leader of the Chinese Communist Party. Members also named a 7-member standing committee made up entirely of Xi's supporters. In Niger, flooding has killed at least 195 people and affected more than 300,000 in the West African nation. The floods, said to be the deadliest in the country's history, have damaged tens of thousands of homes, scores of schools, and grain storage facilities. Ishma Fandikwa reports.
The UN says Niger is one of several countries across West, Central, and East Africa facing dire humanitarian situations due to floods, drought, and conflict. Hundreds have died, millions have been displaced, and property and infrastructure has been destroyed. Some in rural areas have lost all their livestock, and their crops have been deluged. Most of the affected regions were already struggling with high levels of food insecurity, malnutrition, and instability. Though some of the countries are flood and drought-prone, experts blame climate change for the increase in extreme weather events. For NPR News, I am Ishma Fundikwa in Harare.
Hurricane Roslyn slammed into a sparsely populated stretch of Mexico's Pacific coast this morning. It came ashore as a Category 3 storm with maximum sustained winds of 120 miles per hour. It's expected to weaken as it moves inland later today. Officials are warning of floods and strong winds. I'm Nora Rahm, NPR News in Washington.
If you've got questions, Shortwave has answers. Our daily science podcast is brimming with did you know that facts for your next trivia night.
There are only about 6,000 or so species of mammals.
Antimatter can't exist in the presence of matter.
Memories get processed in the hippocampus.
You'll find it all on Shortwave from NPR. Subscribe now.
Dr. Avi Loeb writes very well-written columns these days about all the mysteries that we have in astronomy. We don't even know where, 3/4 of the universe has gone. We don't even know if it's real or not. And, there's this dark matter, all these other concepts that are useful to fill in the equations so the equations look right. But we're not even sure it's real or if there is an alternative way of thinking about it. We don't understand, if I take this pen, and I drop it, I just did an experiment that science doesn't explain. Okay. Now, there are words that we put around it. We say, the force of gravity is such that because the Earth has a certain, yeah, but why does it do it? We still don't understand that. And there are contradictions among the different theories. So to science, this is just one more, except that it's urgent because we have hundreds of thousands of people who have seen this, are deeply impacted by it. The consequences are enormous, and there are people who are now telling Congress and telling the military, look, you've worked on this secretly long enough, and obviously you haven't cracked it. Give a chance to, human ingenuity, human invention. I think part of it is that the people who hold the treasure think that with a little bit more work, we're going to understand why, this drops. And when we do that, we'll have anti-gravity. And when we have anti-gravity, we're going to make billions of dollars starting companies, that will exploit that. So let's not tell anybody that we're doing that.
Yes.
Well, yeah, but, it's been 75 years. And, we still don't have the solution to that. Okay, so we need to do something new. Whether we do it within the U.S. that has these enormous resources, and if we harness it the way we are harnessing AI or genetics, yes, we can do wonderful things, but we're missing a lot, not 90%, but we're missing a lot of the data, and we're missing the best data from the other countries because they don't want to be laughed at by American science. We need to remove that stigma.
Absolutely, we do. How terrible that it was ever put in place in the first place.
Well,
we've missed out on so much.
One of my first mentors in the field was a Frenchman named Aimé Michel, who was a philosopher of science, and he was one of the first intellectuals in France who took the question seriously. And he had contacts. He was a journalist for the French radio, doing the culture shows, somewhat like NPR now in the U.S. And he approached someone he knew, Colonel Clerouin, Clerouin, who was with the French Air Force. And they were often talking about UFOs. And this would have been in 1956, 57. And he asked Clerouin, and the French Air Force had files that I've seen, about 250 cases, only from the Air Force, only from the military, from pilots all over the world, in Morocco and other places. And I still have some of that data. So he went to Clerouin, and in Paris it means you have lunch together at some good restaurant somewhere, and you have a polite discussion, and he said, look, my friend Jacques Vallée is in the US, and he says, there is all that data that he's putting into databases and all openly and so on, and we should share data, we should ask the Americans to share data with us and so on. Clerouin said, that's a great idea. It's a great idea. give me, we'll have lunch again in 1 month. They have lunch every month. And I'll ask around, So next month, they go to the same good restaurant in Paris, and they order food, and Aimé Michel says, well, what did you find? And Clément says, that's not something that we want to do anything about.
Wow.
Aimé Michel says, but why? You told me it was a good idea. There's all that data, in different countries. That's open. Forget the secret data, just the open data, we could share it. He said, well, I went to my counterpart at the US Embassy, and I told him that. The guy said, we're very well aware of the thing, but if we opened up the subject, we would never control the consequences. Consequences with religion, consequences with belief systems, consequences with the economy, the consequences with the defense budget. Why do we have all these expensive jets if we can't stop a flying saucer to land in my field and destroy the plants, like happened in Valençon. The plants were destroyed by that object and radiation from it, or not radioactivity, but yes. The plants died around the place where it had. That's too much of a problem. Government has enough problems right now. Let's not add one more problem. So we're not going to engage with France.
Wow.
I've never forgotten that. This was not just spur of the moment decision. This was a rational decision. They knew the problem. They knew that, this is again the late 50s. They knew this was serious. They had the files. They knew other countries had files, but the decision was, let's not engage.
Wow.
We could get back to something like that in the next few months. Who knows?
What would be necessary to get back to that?
For the scientific community to get involved with the data that's not classified. 99% of the data is not classified. So it's open. You can get it.
That seems counterintuitive.
You cannot stop that. You cannot stop that. There were people in Congress who tried to stop the ARPANET, the internet. They tried to stop it because, there was intense lobbying, and I remember those days. There was intense lobbying by IBM, by Burroughs, by Control Data, and so on, who said, if the government wants a network, we can build a network of computers. With our computers, why do you need those other guys? And the government was, at that point, enlightened enough because of a little agency called ARPA, ARPA, which has become DARPA, where they said, if in an environment of a nuclear attack, we can't rely on any one computer, and we cannot rely on any one phone link among those computers. We have to have a network that everybody can connect all the time, and that will reorganize itself if it's partially destroyed. And by the way, that's what science needs now, because we're not going to buy the same computers for all the universities. That's too expensive to run. We don't have a budget for that. So we'll have a single design, which is completely flexible. Everybody can connect to it. There'll be procedures for that, and then you can do what you want with that, and that will be less expensive, and it will be indestructible, which is why we can do this interview today, without actually paying anything. It's free. It works.
It does work. And thank you and your compatriots that got that going too, by the way. So You know, I actually remember when this was coming, when I got into public workplaces in the 80s, and it was just like, oh, look, we can look at this, we can look at that. It was so much fun, but it was so controlled at first. And yeah, it's just like when my stepdad was a ham radio operator and had all this information and could communicate here, there, and wherever. And so then it was just like, oh, I don't need a ham license. I've got the internet, you know. So, but it's really been, you know, I just had surgery. My doctors were communicating by the web as they were doing things, and internally. But it was just like, hey, I set records with my stuff. So
let's give credit to NASA, because NASA was instrumental in remote medicine and remote surgery.
Yes.
You know, actually before the web, with the old internet. Yep.
You know, it's so amazing because, you know, the things that you have seen change, that you have been an integral part of implementing the change of, that has to be so astonishing. Do you sometimes just sit back and go, holy wow, this is such a different world now? Does it feel different?
And some of my mentors were people who had seen that. You know, I mean, in most fields of technology, you cannot go over 5 years. You don't know what's going to be invented and how it's going to change. You have a pretty good idea of what's possible within 5 years because it's been developed in the labs and you can go see it. But if you're the public, you're surprised by what comes out. Okay, but there were people 50 years ago who had a pretty good idea of how the internet would change society, and actually what it would do, what you could do with it in terms of commerce, for example. That you could compare different things and decide to buy one, and somebody would, would mail it to you.
Yes.
And that you could compare the prices, you could get advice from other people, and that this would be one of the ways the internet would be used. That's 50 years ago. It's documented. So, that's pretty good. It's not just a computer science. People were thinking through, those things. But with UFOs, it's very hard even to tell who does this belong to as a subject. On the average campus, you have, the psychology department is at one end of the campus, and the physics department is at the other end.
Yes.
And they only meet by chance at the Christmas party, or when there is a new dean.
Yes.
But they have no reason to work together. Now, this is a subject that's the ultimate, multidisciplinary subject, and that's how to build the structures where you can bring good people together and educate them as to why it's important for physics, why it's important for sociology, why it's important for psychology, why it's important for religion.
Yes.
I've given most of my files, the files that I've used, to the school of the Department of Religion at Rice University.
Yes.
And now there is an archive called the Archive of the Impossible, assembled by Dr. Jeff Kripal, who is the chair, the assistant chair of the humanities, and built the Department of Religion. Because it's a neutral place where everybody can have access to the data. Whitley Strieber has, seeing that my files were going there, Whitley has done the same thing with his files, which are a treasure.
Yes.
And a number of other people, 10 other people have done the same thing. So it's going to be at least a body of data that's going to be preserved, where people can go.
I find it encouraging that people of your stature in the field in Whitley, as well as Philip Mantle, other people who have been doing a lot of research work and experiencing, are making sure that they are going to have a place where people can gather this information. Because I interviewed David Mercer not too long ago at the University of New Mexico, and there's a lot of people who are bringing work there as well. I think it's so imperative that there be archival sites like that, and I think probably you were one of the people to initiate that in your field. But I'm glad that people are kind of coming on board and doing that, because if we lose the internet, we've got to have a place to go and research.
Yes.
Said the person, the work study librarian from college. But it is imperative to have research facilities, because something, we can get a pulse and we have no internet, or it will come back, but for a time you're going to have to do old school, right?
But we have to do this soon, because yes, the data will stay there, but the data is, a bunch of reports in files, photographs, film. But what I'm going to take with me when I die is knowledge of the witnesses and the conversations with them, the memory of what they said, and it's very different. That's what Dr. Hynek took with him when he died. When these people, not only the actual cases, but the way the administration worked, the way they were handled, for example, by the Air Force. I've gained a lot of respect for the Air Force, by becoming familiar with what they had to do, the conditions under which they had to work, which were not the ideal conditions to do science. And they were waiting for scientists to pick up, what they had, and that never happened. Well, those are things that, there are lots of things that are not written down anywhere, and if you just look at the files, the files to some extent have been, some of them have been sanitized, including official files. But most of them have been biased by the perception or the thinking of the person who wrote the report at the time, including me. I mean, I wouldn't write a report on Socorro today the way I wrote down my notes, back in 1964. So, because I've learned other things, I'm aware of other things. That will be lost. So people will have dry data, which is better than nothing.
True.
But they are going to lose, unless we really start communicating about this quickly and efficiently and openly, we're going to lose a lot of information, including the classified information, especially the classified information. Because, why was it classified? Should it have been classified? Should it be reviewed? Should it be compared to other things? Including the Nimitz data, for example, including all of that. That question has to be raised by people, at a much higher, level than we are. But they have to make those decisions, and they have to make them pretty quickly.
That's almost distressing, because especially when you're dealing with a government entity that you're hoping is going to come along with a methodology to fix this, government doesn't work swiftly. And there's already so much that's been lost when you look at it from that perspective, because the books written by others, yourself included, but Stanton's books, for example, you can't hear unless you go back and listen to interviews with him or lectures by him. Then the books are just stale information with no inflections and no personal emotion registering as you're reading them that you would get from a conversation such as this.
Yes.
There already is a lot that's been lost.
And information that's critical for a scientist.
Yes.
And it's time for a break. We'll be back right after this. Thanks for listening.
You are listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting, Birmingham, Alabama.
Paratalk Radio is your one-stop for all things paranormal, the unknown, and the supernatural. Join us every Monday night at 8 p.m. Eastern, 7 p.m. Central for discussions and guests on topics such as ghosts, hauntings, Bigfoot, UFOs, and more. This broadcast is rated M for mature and intended for listeners over 16 on paratalkradio.com.
Oh, come on. I'm Southern, but... nope. That'll do. Hello. I am Kat Hobson, host of Paranormal Experience here on WBHM Digital Broadcasting out of Birmingham, Alabama. I enjoy having guests from all areas of the paranormal, from ghosts to ufology to cryptids and beyond. You'll find some of the best researchers in their fields bringing you some great information. Join me on Wednesday nights from 8 to 10 p. Eastern here on WBHM Digital Broadcasting.
Since 1948, Fate magazine has brought you reports of the strange and unknown, all of them true. Fate Radio is carrying on that tradition, bringing you the unusual, macabre, strange, and bizarre. Join host Kat Hobson Sunday nights from 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern on WBHM Digital Broadcasting.
Thank you for listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting out of Birmingham, Alabama.
Since 1948, Fate magazine has brought you reports of the strange and unknown, all of them true. Fate Radio is carrying on that tradition, bringing you the unusual, macabre, strange, and bizarre. Join host Kat Hobson Sunday nights from 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern on WBHM Digital Broadcasting.
The time is 23 minutes after the hour.
The fact is, when it hit that tower, bent the tower, took it out of commission, and then made a controlled landing all the way down the hill for about half a mile. So, it was pretty sturdy. Even when it was on the truck on the side, the kids wanted to know, what the propulsion system was or what made it work. There was no hole, there was no damage to the bottom of it, even though it had plowed a boulevard all the way down the hill. The thing was intact. It was brushed, but it wasn't perforated. It wasn't broken. And there were no openings. There were no propellers, there were no jets, there was nothing visible in the space that where the propulsion system could be contained.
And it's really interesting, when they got to see it on the truck, they had seen the full view of the entire body of the craft.
Yes.
So they would know if there were exhaust vents or jets or anything of that nature. It wasn't hidden. It couldn't be hidden.
And those kids were exceptional observers. very good observers. And as you know, Mr. Padilla went on to first to Korea and then to a job with the Highway Patrol inspecting trucks, which is interesting also because he acquired quite a knowledge of mechanics.
Well, I tell you, I was, with all the time that had gone by when you were interviewing him, his attention to detail served him well because he could tell you exactly the size of that truck. He could tell you everything that you wanted to know about a truck that he saw in 45.
Yes.
I mean, that's quite something. I don't know very many people who would be capable of that.
So if we went to the Department of Psychology at the other end of the campus, you would find people who would say, well, kids make up stories, and they even if they don't make up a story, what they remember is probably not what really happened, which is true in most cases. However, I can tell you exactly when the town where I was born was bombed. I can tell you what I saw, and I can tell you what I saw in great detail. It's a flash. I cannot tell you what I had for lunch. Probably some milk and something else. But I was still, a baby. I was 4-year-old or 5-year-old.
Yes.
But I can tell you, I cannot tell you what happened after, and I cannot tell you what happened before. But that moment, is seared in my memory, and you can go to the history books and local stories and verify it, and it's exact. So, I saw when the resistance blew up the rails to stop the retreat of the Germans from Normandy, I saw the rails blowing up. Okay, and we were just maybe 4 or 5 miles from it. You could hear the explosions, and you could see what was going on. Those kids were extremely good observers. They had binoculars. They had professional binoculars, to read the markings on the cows. Yes. Because the ranch is so big, they couldn't go, to close to every cow on the range, but they had to verify, that cow. Well, if there was a cow from another ranch, they would verify that by the brand and so on. So they had tools to repair the fences. They knew how to do all that.
They were not your average children, certainly not from today's period.
Well, in those days, in wartime, the children are given responsibilities, as these kids were, and that's serious. And they're also fascinated with, what they see around them. So they grow up to be really good, and we can tell because we know what they did in their career later. Yes. And Ray Baca became a businessman in the state of Washington. Yes. Got to know Dixie Lee Ray because he was influential in politics. Yes. And he helped her get reelected, get elected as governor of Washington, of the state of Washington. And she knew about the case, and she showed him, she didn't let him have it, but she showed him the classified report about the case from the Atomic Energy Commission.
Oh my.
So we have all these, connections that tie everything together that nobody could make up, that all the details that we already have in the story. And then in this new edition, we found one more witness who could testify about the fibers and the properties of the fibers. So little by little, we continue, and we are going to continue to build up the story.
I personally appreciate that, because when I was reading the book, It's, I mean, I've heard of the angel hairs and the other type fibers that are found and such. And the documentation in Trinity is just fantastic. So it was a neat experience for me to go through. It's probably one of the better case histories I've read, if not the best. I enjoyed
the kids
that.
were there for 10 days, you know. I mean, you don't have that at Roswell. Roswell, nobody knew where the thing had fallen. It's in the following days that somebody went to the site, you know, after the military had already been there and so on.
Yeah.
So, and there is still some contention if it's one site or two sites and so on. I mean, but here we have testimony at many different levels.
Yes.
So.
What was your biggest surprise when you were out there talking with Mr. Padilla as you were interviewing him, getting additional data, wanting to make sure that you had every I dotted and T crossed in your book? What surprised you the most? Was it his observation skills? Was it his willingness to... What got to you?
First is his memory and his gentleness, you know, in revealing, because we were in pain. I mean, we were asking him the same question again and again in different ways, in different places. And when we go to the site, you know, we would start again to replace it geometrically and so on. He was very patient. Was obviously this is something that has made a major impact on his life. The other thing that I was impressed with, you know, I've learned to listen to certain things from the environment that I think most people don't listen to in that particular way. That comes from having had the opportunity to work with Ingo Swann and with Dr. Pudoff and Dr. Targ at SRI in the days of remote viewing. I was brought into the program for a year at one time when Ingo wanted to categorize the methodology better than, you know, the methodology started sort of empirically, you know, I mean, properly and so on, and not documented, but in an empirical way, and was refined and theorized little by little. And so he used me in part as a subject, you know, as a test subject, but he knew that I already had certain awareness of remote viewing. And so we went through this very structured thing. There are things in that landscape when you leave the crash site itself, which has its own very interesting cultural history from the days of the Indian tribes, because it was a meeting point and a sacred place for the tribes. And then when you go beyond that to the edge of the hillside, and you look over Trinity, you know, it's an immense old landscape that comes from, you know, prehistory. It was actually the bed of an ocean that eventually was lifted and was formed, that desert. And there is a majesty to that, and I can understand why people fall in love with that landscape, and why it speaks to them. And so I try to go away from the others who are talking or doing other things, and I would go to the edge of that hillside to try to let it speak to me. And it is, and the Indians had recognized that. It's a fairly unique landscape. And of course, you add the atomic bomb, it's even, it's the only, bomb that has been exploded in the United States, and so there is a lot there, and there is a lot that's very deep that transcends just our daily interpretations of the technology. Technology is one thing, but it's going to be dinner time in Paris pretty soon. So, remember, I'm 9 hours away from you. But we can do this again if you wish.
I would greatly enjoy doing this again.
Sure.
And I didn't realize that you had the soul of a poet, as well as your incredibly powerful gifts that you use for your technology. I love how you shared that about the land. I feel that when I'm there too. It's very special. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I appreciate your time, and I enjoyed you.
Thank you very much.
Enjoy your dinner.
Thank you. I will.
All right. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
You are listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting, the best in paranormal talk, only on Paranormal Experience Radio. Broadcasting live out of Birmingham, Alabama.